Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Discussing a Murder. This is Jeff Jones, and he's going to make sure that he mutes his YouTube channel, hopefully, this time. Uh, hope everybody's doing good out there. Hope everybody's having a nice evening. I know I certainly am. I definitely enjoyed that premiere. A lot to talk about from that premiere. I feel like we could go long on that tonight, but maybe we're just gonna have a short and sweet kind of live. Keep it simple, keep it easy. So tonight we got just a few of us with tonight, Kel and Kath and Brian. So why don't we go around and say hello to everybody? Hello, Kelly. How you doing this evening? Good morning.
Good morning. Excuse me. I'm well. It's nice and early in the morning. Day started, and great episode. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to participate in it, but this is what makes these lives so great because we can always do catch ups.
Yeah, great point. I couldn't agree with you more. I really like the free flowing kind of form we have on these lives, and try to keep an eye on the comments. This is the chance where you guys in the comment section really have a opportunity to ask questions and kind of get your say out. If you have anything that's bubbling up, either from the episode or just general questions, I guess we'd be happy to answer for you if we can. So we'll move over and say hi to Calf. Hey, Calf, how you doing?
Hey y'all, what you doing?
Not a whole lot.
I'm good. I haven't had much sleep, but I feel okay.
Well,
That's
I think we all have lack of sleep, right? Everybody could use more sleep.
yeah,
Even if you had a full night's sleep, you can still take a nap. It's great.
yeah. It was. I don't know. It's been a bad couple of nights of sleeping. I
Do you
think.
need some
Uh, I
caffeine?
think I'm affected by the full moon.
I also agree. I think there's definitely something there with the full moon. I have trouble sleeping on a full moon, but I think it's full moon past like 4 or 5 days now. So,
Oh, I can't use that as an
um,
excuse.
well, it should be less and less. You just feel the full effects on the full moon because it's
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
most
That's it.
gravity pulling on your. Maybe we're the closest to the moon at that point. I think that's right. I'll have to think about that. Look that up.
I don't know. I'm looking forward to the live.
Me too.
Let's get chatting.
Let's get going. Well, we got to introduce Brian first. So let's say hello to Brian. Brian, how you doing, buddy?
Good, good. How y'all?
Pretty good. I'm pretty good. Did you enjoy the premiere? Do you have any comments for that? You want to get the discussion started, Brian?
I did enjoy the premiere always. I no.
Well, there's so much to like. Where do you even begin, though? I guess that's
Wait.
where do you even begin to talk about that? And I got one spot that I'll just throw out there, and you guys can have at it if you want. But I keep going back to the idea of Teresa sitting in her car and finishing a phone call in her car. And just give me a little second here, and I will just kind of expand on what I'm thinking. I think it's possible that Bobby said exactly what he saw and did take a shower. This is just me. This is just me, kind of free flowing. He gets up. He looks out the window. He sees a car there. He sees this car. Okay. He takes a shower in 2 minutes. Right. He's in and out. Right. She's just talking on her phone for like 5 minutes with that woman, and then he grabs his stuff and he heads out, and he sees her going in when he's going the other way. To me, it just fits. I don't know. It's also Teresa's mo. The way she did things was to not use her cell phone while driving. So if you don't use your cell phone when you're driving, you use your cell phone while you're sitting, while you're stationary. So that's just something that's been rattling around in my head. I don't know if that goes into anything you guys had a timeline or anything you wanted to talk about the actual premiere, but that's just something that was bouncing around.
Well, I can add to that for you, Jeff, if you would like me to.
Absolutely. I would
Okay.
absolutely love that.
All right. So Stephen calls Teresa at 2:24. That is the timeline that Zellner initially used, and it's also the timeline that Kratz used at trial. That Teresa pulled up to the Avery salvage yard at 2:24 when Stephen was calling her. But Steven gets asked, I know he gets hammered on it by Liegert and Fassbender on the 9th of November, and I believe he's asked by O'Neill also at least once or twice, either on the 5th or 6th, and maybe both days, if he ever saw Teresa on the phone, and Steven insists that he did not. Then Steven calls her again at 2:35. And Steven's always said that he said that he called her and he saw her pull up, and so then he hung up and walked out and greeted her in that. Well, at 2:27, Auto Trader calls Teresa and she talks for a little over 4 minutes at 2:27. So, I feel what you're saying. I agree that it's 100% possible. I feel that Teresa could have pulled up to the Dassey or to Barb's van, got out, and began to take pictures. It would have had to be about 2:25, 2:26. Her phone rings at 2:27. She answers it. Bobby sees her pull up. I still don't think that Bobby necessarily had time to take a shower. I think he probably showered first, but like maybe he's getting out of the shower. I don't know. But he could have, I guess, because she's on the phone for 4.5 minutes. And
that's right.
So then he easily could have gotten his bow and gathered his things and walked out the door, and left at about 2:34, about a minute after Teresa has hung up her phone, finished up her photographs and all that, and starts to walk towards Steven's, because Steven does at one point say that she was walking towards his trailer when he walked out to meet her. And somewhere in there, Bobby leaves in his blazer. Yeah, I mean, I think it's, and Steven just does, because there's two things that happen. Okay, there's two things that happen. One, Bobby never says that he said he's talking when he's interviewed by Loy, he says he saw Steven, but that's the only time Bobby ever says he saw Steven. Steven never says he saw Bobby. The only the closest thing that Steven sees to Bobby is that his blazer was there, and then all of a sudden he goes inside, puts the book down, comes back out, and the blazer's gone. So there's a split second in Steven's timeline too, where again the blazer was there, then it wasn't, and and so I feel like that split second could have happened, and Steven just misremembered seeing the blazer. I don't, you know what I mean? Maybe I don't know. I think it's possible though. I definitely feel it's possible, and it definitely makes Bobby's explanation of things that he did. Well, I took a shower, I woke up, popped in the shower, saw Teresa, because they both say that she was there for about 5 minutes too, and that's kind of the puzzling thing about the whole thing. Sure, they could have colluded together on the 4th, or not colluded, but I mean, they could have discussed it on the 4th, maybe.
If she did a 5-minute call there, then she would have been there at least 5 minutes, right?
Well, you're right, but Bobby wouldn't have been staring at her for that 5 minutes while she's on the phone. That's when he's gathering his bow and finishing putting his boots on or whatever, and getting in his, you know what I'm saying? That's 5 minutes if Bobby's not standing in front of his window, basically. But it's also 5 minutes. I mean, you got to wonder what Steven was doing. But then again, Steven called her at 2:24. She doesn't answer. Maybe thinks around.
So you look out the window 3 minutes later and realize when he was calling her, she was actually sitting.
Well, no, because he calls her again at 2:35. I mean, the 2:35 thing actually makes sense as far as Steven calling her, and like that's when he saw that Teresa was there at 2:35. But that doesn't see. I mean, that's the way Zellner explains it too, and the way Zellner explains it makes perfect sense. Like, oh, he saw her pull up. He's calling her at 2:35. He sees her pull up, so he hangs up and walks out to greet Teresa, right? But see that Steven never really says. He just describes a normal visit. She showed up between 2:30 like she always does. She took pictures for 5 minutes. That's like she always does. She handed me the receipt like she always does. You know what I mean? And so it's like he doesn't really actually. Steven's a little. He tells a couple slight variations too as to whether or not he actually saw Teresa taking pictures. It's almost because Kel, back me up on this. I believe it's in Zellner's affidavit, or Steven's affidavit to Zellner, where he says that Teresa was walking towards his trailer, which kind of would indicate that she's already done taking photographs. If she's already either that or she's walking to Steven's trailer to talk to Steven before she takes the photographs, which then totally overrides what Bobby said, because then what Bobby says doesn't make any sense, because he saw her pull up, get out, and start taking pictures, right? So I don't know. Anyway, it all kind of works. What you're saying, Jeff, I do believe it's definitely a possibility.
Thanks for
when when you get in that whole timeline thing. But so the 235 thing, like, yeah, maybe Steven doesn't actually see her pull up, as in driving up at 235.
Right.
Maybe he just looks out and says, he's on the
He
phone
just
to her, looks out the window and like, oh, she's already here, and he hangs up and
She
then he
just
walks
arrived,
out.
right? You just assume she must have just arrived because
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Zellner's theory is not crazy. It's just maybe she had been in the driveway for 5 minutes talking to the on the phone since 227. I mean, it's definitely possible. And I really, it makes me want to watch the reenactment again because
oh, maybe we should do that today. I don't know if we got that in me.
well,
That's a lot.
I just want to see that. I just want to see Steven's view when Bobby's leaving. Like how long does it? Because the reenactment. Okay, it starts at 2:35. Basically, Teresa pulls up, and by 2:41, she's already off the property. Pinging the Whitelaw Tower and that. And so, like, how long does it actually take for Bobby to pull out of the driveway before and where Steven can't see him anymore? I mean, is it a matter of like 3 seconds, or is it 30 seconds where it's like, how does Steven not see Bobby leaving the drive? Like it's I've always kind of wondered how he doesn't see. Even O'Neill, if you listen to the recorded interview, the audio of it, even O'Neill's like, what do you mean you didn't see Bobby leave? Like, I didn't see him leave. I went out there and then he was gone. Well, how do you know he was there? Well, I saw his blazer. Okay. And then you went inside. Yeah, I went inside. I put the book down. I came back outside, and his blazer was gone. Well, why were you going over there? Just because that's what I. He doesn't really have a reason. He's like, well, that's what I do. I just go over and say hi to Bobby. But
Well, I think that you hit a good point, Jeff Jones. Again, I don't know what scenario is real, and we can only speculate on this, but this is why we do the open lives. We have that discussion. Listen, I agree with Ziggy, what he was saying in terms of the timeline as well. There was a change in the timeline, and that stemmed from the phone calls from what they presented in his original affidavit to Kathleen and what she went with for a while until the supplemental came in, and what was presented in trial, which was based on that original timeline. So maybe, when we go back to the 224 call that he originally calls and he's apparently calling to say, like, where are you? And he put his phone on private so she didn't feel obliged to be rushed in a sense. Could she have already been there? Could she have just been a little bit further down the track, like Ziggy and you had kind of implied, that she's on the side, on the phone, but she's already on the actual salvage yard? I don't know, because then the issue is people say that, go back to her phone pings and see where she's pinging when that call comes in at 2:27 when she's on the phone to Dawn. So there's all these little in-between details that you've got to kind of like line them up and see where it fits. As for the whole shower thing, I get it. Bobby isn't consistent with that. It doesn't make sense that he's in a shower for 5 minutes and he comes out and he saw her through the window and then he gets dressed. I get it. But then when I go back to the original statement at the very beginning, as early as the 5th, that he actually wrote himself, and he put the shower first. He got up, he had a shower. As he was getting dressed, he noticed she arrived. Those are all the sliding door moments, like Dr. Silkman and I have repeated in other podcasts, that 30 seconds delay forward or back can impact everything significantly. And it could be just that simple. And then when you go back to the next interview he has, he didn't bring up the shower first. Dietrich lead questions him into the shower. And he doesn't even lead question into him on the basis of what Bobby had originally wrote. He repeats back to him, you had the shower after she arrived, and he just goes, yep. Like he didn't even take the moment to go, hang on a minute, no, I had it before. He just was going along with what was repeated to him as what we'd call that would be a leading question, because it was an implied question, not something he offered up. So, because if you go back to what he offered up originally, in his very original that he signed to in his own handwriting, the shower happened before she even arrived. So by the time she got there, he was already ready to basically walk out that door and go. Does that change anything? I don't know. But these are the facts that we're dealt with, and where do they fit in? I don't know. I don't
Right,
know.
that's the thing. See, Bobby's just like very similar to Steven in that sense. Steven's just describing a typical visit from Teresa. You know, she arrives between 2:30 like she always does. She gets out, takes pictures, and Bobby's explaining the exact same thing. Or not the exact same thing, but well, he does in a sense, but at the same time, he's just describing a typical day. Like, well, this is what I do. I work nights. I slept all day. I woke up about 2:30, took a shower, and then I see this lady taking pictures. Didn't know what she was doing. She seemed fine. Grabbed my bow, went hunting, because that's what he does, right? I mean, he just kind of describes it in a sense because we don't have the audio for November 5th, but it really seems like he's just real vague about it. You know, just describing like he does every morning and wakes up. You know, it's not like really that significant to him, other than yeah, I do remember seeing the girl taking pictures. So, so I don't. That's why I do kind of feel like he probably took a shower before, and he probably saw her as he got out of the shower or whatever. I don't know, but the relevance to it too that I forgot to mention, and Jeff didn't bring up either, is so she called. We know she called Zippers at 2:12, left a voicemail. According to Dietering, the voicemail is lost, but according to Dietering, of course, she was lost looking for directions to Zippers at 2:12 p.m. And it's a 15-minute drive, solid 15-minute drive from Zippers to Avery's. So if she is lost at 2:12 because she can't find Zippers, and she arrives at the salvage yard at 2:24, like Kratz went with at trial, there's absolutely no way she went to Zippers before she went to Avery's. But I've battled this out for years now with anyone and everyone who understands technology and cell phones and everything else way far better than I do, and um, basically been told that if you look at the pings, they go in a roundabout circles. So this is what I don't know the technical terms for them in that, but anyways, it makes sense that she went to the salvage yard last. So, but but
Well,
if you can get her on the salvage yard before, that's why Zellner doesn't really do. Well, I don't want to say she doesn't do Steven any favors. She doesn't do my zipper. You know, she doesn't do Zipper's last any favors by moving the timeline to 2:35, because now she could actually find Zippers at about 2:14 ish, you know what I mean, and leave by 2:20, and arrive right at 2:35, like Zellner says she does.
Well, it's interesting. It really is. And I guess bringing up the pings, I agree. That's something that I really struggle to ever explore. Have no experience in it. We've spoken to obviously Big Jeff, who has a lot of experience, and he weighs up as much as he can. And, even he has said that there's, all these variables to it. So it's really hard to really commit to kind of what's real and what's not. And I'm just going to say that I've been watching the prosecutors, and they've been covering the Adnan case, which is really, really interesting. Everyone knows that case. It's ongoing in terms of the courts and where they're at. But the reason why I bring this up, and just to parallel it in terms of this case, is the Brett, one of the prosecutors, actually brings up the pings. And you got to remember, this crime, I believe, was done earlier than even in 2005. So it was like around 2000, 2001, I believe. I've got to really double check that.
Oh,
But it was yes.
Oh, I think it was 99 even, but you're close.
Oh, I thought, it could have been. I thought it was early 2000s. Yeah, I know it was definitely before Teresa. And the reason why I'm going to this point is because he brings up the phone pings, and he actually says, and I timestamped it for some of the team members that I've shared it with. There's a timestamp, and he brings up, because he leads into it by saying the controversy of phone tower pings. And he said that the accuracy of an incoming call and capturing a ping's location is pretty shit. It's not accurate. It's been used in courts to really fluff up cases for the defense. And it kind of has also been used in court cases to fluff up the prosecution's side as well, because an incoming call has a different kind of, in his stance, different kind of networking connection and collection of data that sends off. He said the true accuracy of someone's pings comes from when the phone itself is being activated from the user. So a phone call going out or a message going out, that is the accuracy, because it's going into that phone. The reason why I bring that up is because of, this controversy about the White Law Tower and what you said, Ziggy, in terms of Kathleen and Stephen Avery kind of shifting more towards the significance of 1435 call of her arriving, because then what does that make the 1441 call of White Law Tower mean? And I think this is where it gets interesting, because if she left, how is she already being pinged from an incoming call that far down the road? I know it doesn't seem far, and like you said, it's the radius side of it, the catchment. Is she inside that catchment of that circle? But then what does it do for the state? Well, it helps them, because it doesn't say she isn't still not on the salvage yard as well, because again, it's an incoming call. And if we're going back to the early 2000s and the technology back then, they're saying it's not accurate. There's an inconsistencies with the data back then and all the variations of what was being caught. So even though she's being caught on the White Law Tower, does that mean she's actually on the road at that point anymore?
Well, that's the thing, and I mean, and again, I've watched, Zellner's reenactment, so it is possible to do it all in 6 minutes. God, it's just such a tight timeline, but so is everything else. So go figure.
I'm just going to I'm just going to vocalize what I just saw. Rumor has it, I also have messaged Brett and Alice several times. They're not interested at this point. I've also been talking to somebody else that's connected to them who wants to actually have a meeting with me discussing it, and they're on the defense side of the law. So the prosecutors are obviously the state, but I've spoken to someone on the defense side. We're potentially trying to find a time zone that suits us both, being that he's in America and I'm in Australia. It's a bit hard. But yeah, there's a lot. I've actually reached out to several lawyers, and they range from defense to state, and I get them. The panel here will have my back here, because I've sent them screenshots of the conversations, and I've had them, and they're all on board. But the moment I mention that Stephen Avery case, they don't want nothing to do with it.
Do you happen to know? Because I see Anthony's asking. Do you happen to know which tower Bobby pinged on? I know that there's a couple different. Well, it's the same tower, but I don't. He could have pinged. He could have been where he said he was when he pinged at 302. Correct. That was the last verdict we got.
Yes,
Zellner
that's
says no. Zellner says no, but a couple other people have said that it's possible.
It's possible. I think it comes
It's hard
down
to say. I guess it's really
the
hard to say.
catchment. Yeah, it's this circle, this layer zone that you have to, if you put them in like a zone kind of thing. Again, I shouldn't be even just paraphrasing this, because I'm not confident in it, because I didn't really explore this side of it. But from what I gathered in terms of the community, other members who are got very deep and dived into it and produced a lot of very interesting
right, and understand the sectors,
understanding the
and all that
sectors and
stuff.
stuff. They produced that, it might actually be factual and in Bobby's favor, but again, it's interpretation of how you view it and what is relevant in terms of the zones and how it's being perceived by an expert. It's really, really
Right.
hard.
There's a detail I can add to that. It's not much, but in recent digging on this, what I have come to find is that, you see a cell phone tower, it has 360-degree like coverage area, right? And you think, oh, it's going to be equal power. It's going to have the equal amount of power all the way around it, right? And everything within an exact 20-mile radius will be part of its coverage area. But it's actually not like that at all. They get really blotchy. It's like looking at a rash on your arm. not like a perfect triangle or a perfect circle where it's going to have this perfect coverage area. When you have overlapping coverages of towers, this one has a little bit more strength, so it shrinks the other one a little bit, and it's more of like blotchy coverage areas than this perfect circle that I think a lot of times in our head we have that idea, like, but it's a 360-degree tower, so it must get everything within 20 miles equally, and it's just not. That's the reality that I'm coming to learn, that it's just not like that.
I
And so
agree.
it makes it even more difficult to know where she was. Maybe the White Law Tower is just a little bit higher in elevation, and it's pushing out further, so it has a longer coverage distance. You know what I mean? You don't really know, and that's why you never can pin down where anyone is. You can't really triangulate anybody's just using this data.
And you know what, Jeff Jones, you just hit the nail on the head in a sense, and I totally agree. And the other thing on the flip side of that is this is why experts are so interesting to either side, because experts get paid, and you are literally paying them, whether you are the defense side or the prosecution side, you're paying the expert that's more favorable to look at that same data and come to the conclusion that you need for your defense or your narrative, basically. So that's the interesting part. We have obviously the state would say that White Law Tower still shows that Teresa Halbach could be still on the property. Yet we have Kathleen's expert, the same data, looking at the same stuff, that could come in and go, no, it means she left and she was in a different location, and there is another opportunity that someone else could have been in that same catchment 20 minutes later. This is the power of experts. It's what one sells the story better to the jury, that is able to articulate it, have that connecting factor, and make it simple stupid for them. Because some jurors, if I was a juror and I was hearing about phone pings, who's someone who doesn't have that technology skill base and isn't quite interested in it, I would be like cross-eyed going, what the fuck are you talking about, basically? And if you dumbed it down for me, and an expert, regardless what side it was, helped me understand their point, that's how you win them. That's how you get the jury on your side. So in contrast to that, it's all of those things. And I know Big Jeff has also brought it up a million times. The issue that you have with these phone pings is the variations of it. Like you said, could one tower be taller than the other? Was the lines busy? Was the network you were with catch one tower preferably more than the other? Was there a dip in the road? Was there a dip in reception? All these variables become a part of the event. So these are just the little things, I guess, that, become part of it.
With Bobby's calls, if you have a glance at them, he seems to be moving a lot in the car. He's driving around. He's zipping here, zipping there. He's making calls. He's pinging off a lot of different towers. And, even if they're the correct tower or not, he's still moving. You know what I mean? He doesn't really seem to be stationary for very long.
Right. Doesn't he?
So
I'd have to look at Bobby's calls again. I feel like he made a phone call at like 2:45. Maybe not though. No, he must have. His first one must be at 3:02.
Yeah,
3:02, and then he calls again at 3:56 and 3:57.
Yeah.
So
the Bobby call at 3:02
towers.
west of Fisherville Road.
I'm going to get this picture a little bit closer, so I'm going to take a screenshot and open it that way. But it kind of demonstrates what I was just talking about, how they're not a perfect circle in their coverage area of a tower. So let me pull this up. Where is it?
Like, while you're doing that, Jeff, I'm just going to feed into a little bit of the discussion in the chat. we have to remember this is in 2005. How reliable and strong was technology back then in terms of where we are now? Could you imagine if this crime happened now? We have things like Find My Phone, and you can be on Snapchat and send directly your location to somebody, and you can zoom in and it's putting you in the house you're in, so you can have this bird eye view. There's so much new technology that the pings and the location is so strong now, and we're seeing it now play out in a now case, because we have the Brian Kohlberger or whatever his name is. I hate to butcher it,
Right.
but we've
Well-
got that case where pings are a part of that state's narrative, because they believe that they can present to a jury that shows him pinging towards going into the victim's area. Phone goes off while the crime is being committed, and the phone goes back on and pings back when he's leaving the area. And then
Right.
potentially, if I read it correctly, he's pinging again in the morning at 9 o'clock. He's gone back to the crime scene, almost like he's looking to see if he's, again, this is only paraphrasing because I'm not accusing him of guilt. He's allegedly innocent until proven guilty, but the state is alleging that he's gone back to see whether anyone's discovered his crime scene. So that's what I mean in terms of technology. What in 2005 versus now could have made a difference to this case? It's those hindsight moments that you think, shit.
So this is exactly, and this is the picture that I wanted to show. Each different color represents a different coverage area for those towers. Now, this is just a random picture. It's not Wisconsin. I don't even know where this is. This is we could figure it out where it is. But the point is that look at how not one of those towers is a perfect circle. Not one of them. Some of them are like narrow. It really depends on the coverage area. It depends on the landscape. It depends. Look at, there's spots right in the middle where there's no coverage. Right? Like, oh, look here, there's just no coverage here, no coverage. So I guess that's my point, that we have to stop thinking about pings as it's a guarantee that someone was, triangulated in this zone based on a ping, because like, as you can see, there's three modes right here. 1, 2, 3. They all have that. They're all faced in that kind of triangle. So they do sectors, right? But look at how this one's aimed here and it collects this. Look at how this one's aimed here and it like curves to here. Look at how this one's aimed here and it's butting right up against. Look at this yellow and green squeezing and overlap with red here and some brown. So like, if you're driving here, you'd be potentially hitting a bunch of different towers. And that's the point I'm trying to illustrate, is that unfortunately the ping data is only a guideline. I would, not a perfect science. Unfortunately, that's the hard truth that I came to. But that's neither here nor there. Keep pinging along if you think you got something. So what else? Enough with this, unless you guys want me to keep that up. What about the premiere? We just had that episode and we kind of jumped into this conversation, but there was a lot that was said about the computer and Bobby, and a lot to be taken. Anybody have any takeaways for that? Kel, you got a takeaway or something for that?
Of course I have a takeaway of that. That is
I'm
something that I don't want to, I want this to be a shared conversation. This is something that we've worked for, we've worked towards it. We're at that point. Let's discuss it as a panel and for the chat. So the first thing that I would address in terms of all of it is, that, and I said in the premiere, because I wasn't able to make it, I'll save it for this live so we can kind of really explore it together as a team. The thing is, I totally get where everyone comes from. I really, really do, because I'm in the same boat. One, I want nothing more than an evidentiary hearing, at least, just to get some movement, get some ground in there, and get a foundation going, and let Kathleen work what she's got and let her have her chance. That's the first thing. Secondly, I totally get that everyone understands that, we're all looking at this in hindsight. So, the question is, would the Dassey computer have made an impact towards Bobby, at least in terms of perjury or on the stand and in real time? And is that where the constitutional rights and something went fundamentally wrong by, not allowing Denny? I get all that too. The thing is, and I've said it a million times, when you really read all the court proceedings and all the motions and every decision that's handed down, there is a baseline that we all have to stay in between those four corners. And those four corners is this. It's easier to go back now and say the should have, could have, but didn't. And I get it. But the truth is, there was no guarantees that even the Dassey computer ever would have even made it into the trial case because of the layers it has to get through to become admissible in a courtroom. So when I say that, is the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the panel, and I'm going to ask everyone in chat. My question is this: do you guys think that Judge Fox in particular was a balanced judge, or do you think he made some more favorable decisions towards the state? And for example, for like things that I think that he might have leaned more favorable to the state of things like this. He let the call come into the case for the jury to hear, where Brennan's calling his mum and he's saying to his mum, I did some of it. And we know that a lot of people have hung on to that and think that it's another admission of his guilt and his participation in the crime. And that kind of really hurt Brendan in a sense, because he didn't have law enforcement officers sitting beside him, leading him, although he had just left them and they had given him this big spiel about, if you don't call your mum, Brendan, we're going to call your mum. But that wasn't the bit that was highlighted in court. The only thing that was highlighted in court that Fox allowed in was the call. So they heard it in its entirety. They didn't have the backstory that there was that behind the scene pressure of, you do it or we will. And then obviously we have that whole admission of the confession tape itself. Judge Fox actually allowed the confession to stop at the moment that Brendan recants to his mum. They got inside my head. So do you think that they were fair decisions by the judge, or do you think that was more favorable to the state because they actually asked for these points to come in and for when the point should stop? So to the panel and the chat, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, my quick reaction to that is I did not get the impression of impartiality from Judge during that. I think that they did stop it early, didn't they? And they're like, that's enough. We don't need to put any more. We don't need to watch the whole thing, right? And they agree. Yeah, it was kind of strange. It was strange. I have a hard time seeing anything other than that they were, for some reason, extremely harsh on Brendan. I feel like if it was a different case, he would have. I don't think I'm answering your question anyway. Cap, do you have an opinion? It's a tough one.
Yeah.
All right, yeah.
Ask it again, Kel. I think I understood it, but I was sorry. I was busy.
So in terms of the judge's rulings, do you think that they were being more favorable to allowing in the state's request to have certain things brought in as evidence? Or do you think that he was well balanced, that he made the right decisions by allowing certain parts of the evidence to be stopped and not heard in its entirety or brought in at all? And that's why I made reference to the confession. He allowed the state to win that argument, that it could be stopped right before he recants. And also he allowed the state to bring in the evidence of that phone call where he tells his mum on the phone that I did some of it, that I was there that night. We did have a fire, and it does sound in like when you listen to it and you don't know the story behind it, it does sound damning, and it would definitely sound damning to a jury when they're not hearing that, he had just been pulled by the detectives to have another interview without his lawyer. And you got to remember, this was the interview that the Len Skowinski or whatever the guy's name was, got slapped around for, because he allowed him to start doing all these interviews without him present. And then still be able to produce this call to the jury, even though he shouldn't have ever been allowed to do it in the first place.
Right. Yeah. No. Absolutely. No. Brendan got screwed big time. They should have been able to. They probably should have. I mean, Fox probably should have just left the whole thing out, and that because it was really damage control by the time they put Brendan on the stand.
Well,
sense.
it does seem that Judge Duffin thought it should have been left out, huh?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, and some other judges too. So
Yep.
It's like that one. It's like, and it's tough. It's tough, but there's never going to be a perfect scenario in any justice system unless we hand it over to AI. If you guys are ready to do that, let me know. Otherwise, we're stuck with people and humans. And and you got 5-4. You know what I mean? You're always going to have an uneven number of jurors. Well, I guess in a 12 juror, but judges. So there's a tiebreaker usually. Or if it's tied, tie goes to the runner kind of thing in baseball. Baseball analogy, tie goes to the runner, right? But sometimes these decisions are a razor's edge, and you got half of the judges think Brendan should walk, and the other half don't, and it's frustrating to no end. What can we say?
So the reason why I brought up that question and I posed it, and from reading the chat right now, it appears that everyone's kind of on the same headspace as where I was thinking, that there was more of a fairness to the state. The state were winning most of their arguments in terms of what was being admissible in court and what was being allowed in. So the reason why I bring that up as the baseline and the foundation of where I'm going with this is, if we're all agreeing that the state was already ahead in terms of what direction they were wanting in, and they were obviously having certain support from the judge, my point is this: there is no reason why the Dassey computer content couldn't have been used actually against Brendan Dassey. Now, hear me out. On the purpose of this, Ken Kratz could have put up a great argument, in a sense, because that's what he was doing, and like I just announced, he was winning them all, that, okay, judge, we will bring in the Dassey computer against Brendan, but we will only bring out to the point where Brendan's arrested. So we won't view anything after he goes in, because that's all admissible, because he's in jail. There's nothing to see here. We'll only focus on what's prior to that. Now, you can't sit there and go, I don't think so, because it happened. It kept happening in the courtroom. They kept winning arguments that was more favorable to him and making Brendan look bad. So they could have absolutely stopped it at the date of his arrest and only focused on what was done prior. So if you go back and look what was done prior, you have things like a majority of the timestamps we do have are done after school around 4:00 in the afternoons. Weekends, Saturday and Sunday, are the hot spots of all the data, majority of the data. We do have a few odd days, which is like a Tuesday or a Thursday, but what don't we have? And something that, the defense could have absolutely argued it, but it doesn't do much for the problem, and the problem being that it is Brendan Dassey who is the convicted, or was at that point being accused of, the rap, add an E to the end of that, and the unaliving of Teresa Halbach. So they could have easily made it look like, in a sense, that Brendan had these, thought patterns, but he was exposed to this kind of content before the crime. And that is why this whole Dassey computer situation is grey. I know Kathleen is just trying to create the Dassey computer as a motive because you need your 3 prongs. I get it. But the grey area is she's trying to eliminate everyone and just focus on the Bobby. There is searches in there that she's not shown, but she's not taken into consideration that there's things that point to things that are things but Bobby. There's someone else doing it. And she hasn't factored in all these other variables like spring breaks, school holidays. There's certain days of that school that had half days. They call them student school days, public holidays, teachers' days, truancy days, and obviously sick days. So these are all these variables into that. And although I'm not confident, or I'm not even in the slightest bit implying that Brendan did any of these searches, I'm just saying in terms of the law, Ken Karatz could have been cheeky and used it. We already seen him kind of hint to Dean and Strang that if you want to play games, I'm going to call it Brendan's computer. So there's always that aspect to it as well, that this could have actually been slapped around on Brendan, because with the state having that favor from the courts, they could have introduced it as part of his narrative. The other thing that I just want to quickly address, and this is leaning more towards the 31st, because there seems to be a really interesting, not misunderstanding. I think there's just this I don't know what's the word, just this, I don't know. I'll just get to the point. In Kathleen's original motions, there's like how many, Ziggy, at the top of your head, do you remember how many points of internet browsing points there was that day? Was there like 7? I'm thinking 7.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Well, yeah, 7 or 8 maybe. They start at 6:02 a.m. She's since dropped those first 3, so there's about 4 left, 4 or 5.
Yeah. So here's the catch. So in her original, she had Bobby attached to every single computer access that day, and she always tried to stem her motive of the 31st connection to Teresa was that he was basically already in like a sexual zone, kind of, we could say. The problem is, in her latest motion, it was the very first thing I noticed. She opened a door, and in a sense, she opened the door to the state, because she now has dropped 3 of those time slots, and now is claiming that Bobby is not accountable for those moments. So that's like the 6:08, the 6:15 one, and like the 6:40 or 6:35 one. And she's now stating that the 4 other times is now beginning from 7:15 onwards, when the boys would have been at school and Bobby was allegedly now at the house purely by himself. Now, I get when people go, well, there's pings through the day. And I agree. There appears to be computer accessibility throughout the day, period. But here's the catch when I say the door's been open. There is no timestamps to those 31st searches. So the issue is the state now has had the door open where they can find an expert, and that expert can come in and go, listen, all those searches that you see that day now could have all been done in those 3 slots that she's dropped. There is no evidence that all those searches were spread throughout the day, or if they were all done in one particular time zone of that day, or it was all done at the very end of the day, the very last point before Teresa comes at like 1:40. It literally, an expert can come in and go, Kathleen opened the door that this could have all been done even when Brendan Dassey was home before he left to school that day, because she's now openly admitting by dropping those dates, them timestamps, that other people had access to do those searches. Now, the next layer of that thing is the issue that the judges now has to look at is in terms of motive. She has to review the 31st as more of her, like, the structure, the platform, the foundation of this crime, and look at it and go, is there anything said or searched on the 31st that shows a direct connection to the crime of Teresa? Did someone search something so terribly disgusting or in conjunction of the crime that has that direct connection? The answer is no. And the reason why we can confidently say that is because we have those searches. We know what the searches were, and none of them have any, like, actual connecting factors to the crime of Teresa Halbach. They are based on teens at best. So that doesn't mean that a killer isn't going to just murder just because they were looking at teens potentially throughout the day, doesn't mean that they're not going to murder a 25-year-old. But again, it just eliminates that connecting factor. It's not there. The crime isn't shown on the day that Bobby's allegedly fiending out of his head. Today's the day he's going to commit the most unspeakable act against a human being, but not have that power source of searching behind him that's driving this powerful force. It's just not there. And so we also had the ability to speak to an expert. Actually, all four of us were on the call, and we were all having a discussion, and we discussed in terms of what does it mean that there was access on the computer. And he kind of said it does mean that it could have been someone physically sitting at the computer, having to access it to bring those, capturing that data of alive pings that someone was live. But then there's other variables to that. And you could get an expert in, the state could get an expert in and go, it was programs running in the background. It could have been a game running in the background. It could have been viruses from the porn search in the morning still running in the background that was doing all these, capturing these online, search things that we're seeing. But we don't actually have the timestamps that connects to the times that were actually computer activity. So there is a very big gray area in that. And I think that if it goes to a hearing, this is the issue that Kathleen will go against. And this is where experts will become the primary source here. Which expert will come in and be able, and remember, there won't be a jury. It'll be to Judge Angela, who will convince her that it's either relevant or irrelevant. Thoughts, anyone?
Or that it would beat an appeal in an appeals court, right? Like something like that. You also have to factor that in, right? Like, I think everybody's playing the long game. Everybody plays the long game, right? Like, they're already, like, whatever she's writing, she's already writing it to the appeals court. Would you agree with that?
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Jukes nailed it earlier when he made a comment that back in Crest didn't want to open up that can of worms, and I don't think Feuding the String wanted to open up that can of worms either, because Stephen wasn't being charged with rape to begin with. Number two, you've got to analyze a computer in the same sense or direction that Zellner's analyzed it, with ruling out everybody but Bobby. And then, as you're saying, with if you rule out, okay, the basis of Zellner's argument is the porn in March and April, and yet it doesn't. Which you could, because you could make an argument for the porn in March and April, but the murder was in October. So that's where it. I don't know. It's a fine line. I don't know. Like, I understand where Zellner is coming from, but and if she were to ever get it back to court, and they rule out those searches from past, say, November, then she's kind of stuck with the porn on the 31st of October. And you're right, it really doesn't. I mean, I guess it could be motive. I don't think you need a whole lot to get to the motive prong, but I don't know.
Well, the thing is,
thoughts on it, I guess.
The state has presented to the judges, and the courts of appeal kind of actually did already open this doorway as well. And that is, it's no longer just motive of killing Teresa, there's that secondhand prong now that the motive also has to prove why someone would frame Stephen Avery. That is essentially, because you got to remember, that is Kathleen's defense. Her defense is that Bobby Dassey potentially unalived Teresa Halbach and then framed his uncle for that murder. So that is the reason why it's motive. I know that usually from all the literature I wrote in terms of the court rulings and what is the fundamental constitutional right of Denny means and what is like how simplified can you get it, I don't think it's as simple as just having what is presented, what we see. There's always that underlying needs more. You can't just go, because otherwise you could have someone sitting in jail saying, well, it must have been my next door neighbor. Otherwise, every Tom, Dick, and Harry will be calling out from the jail saying, well, if that's as simple as it is, you just need 3 prongs without evidence to prove it. I'll blame my next door neighbor because they were throwing fucking leaves over my fence the year before. And that's a motive. You can't there's got to be more. And we're in post-conviction. You can't just say Bobby killed her because he was looking at teen porn in the morning throughout the day when he said he was asleep, potentially, and that drove him to do it. And not only did it drive him to do it, then he decided, I'm going to frame my uncle. You can't just get from point A to B. The judges in this part of the case don't want that. They want it all. They need it all. Otherwise, the scary part is, it's not only scary part, the saddest thing is there's innocent people that are falling into these cracks that are designed to keep the really bad fucks in, that we don't want to have these opportunities to go out there and make it easy to get out, to hurt our family and people again.
Really important point.
That is the truth.
We don't, and that's we always think like, oh, these laws, when we're looking at the prism as being a post conviction, we're looking at these laws and going, oh, it's so hard to get any movement on a case. And 99.5% of the time you want it that way. You don't want people to be able to, like you said, just come up with these theories and say my neighbor did it. And so as tough as it is, and I think we all have harped on this for a little bit to say, like, that's why it is so gosh darn important to get it right the first time. And it does take on average of 15 years or more to get someone released from prison when they're falsely convicted. Like, it's a rough one out there, Do we want to read these questions, Kath?
Yeah, let's read some.
All right. How about the first one that's up on the...
Yep. Okay. Right. So with KZ's focus on Bobby as a Denny, does that mean she believes the timelines the prosecution presented, meaning she can't make a connection to anyone else?
Well, see, that goes back to what Kel was saying, because I was going to reiterate too real quick. See, the computer gets access at 6:02 a.m. and Bobby worked till 6 a.m., so he didn't get home till like 6:30, and nobody ever argued with that. And so eventually Zelma realized it and removed the times prior to 7 o'clock from her motion, and that's why she did it, because Bobby wasn't home at 6:02 a.m. and Barb left for work around 5:30ish, I believe. But anyways, so that was on that. Gosh darn, it's getting late for me too. What was the question again? Oh yeah, so back to as far as the Denny in that, she's kind of locked into that timeline. She can name whoever she wants. Bobby's kind of the easiest one to grasp, because he was, he always said that he saw Teresa when she showed up and this and that. And Stephen's first statement is that he saw Teresa leave. Not only did he see her leave, but she turned left out of the salvage yard, which really eliminates everybody that's else is on Stephen's list, which would be like Chuck and Earl and anybody else, because he doesn't see anybody following Teresa. So the only person that could be following Teresa in a sense would be Bobby. And that goes back to the fact that Stephen didn't actually physically see Bobby leave. He just knows that he did, because he saw the Blazer, went inside, came back out, the Blazer was gone. So it's not that she necessarily couldn't name someone else. It's just he's kind of the Bobby's kind of the one guy that's kind of left in that situation, I guess. Brendan and Blaine aren't home. Barb's not home. Nobody mentions Taddock until later, and even when they do, he was there at noon, so just 2.5 hours away from Teresa arriving, anyways. Um, I don't know. So yeah, I guess I don't know who else she would name, or who else she could name, unless, and yeah, it's just my thoughts, I guess. And
Yeah.
I think
says others.
No, I'm totally.
I totally agree with you, Brian. And in fact, I think, in my opinion, from when you go back to the very beginning and start reading how she adds Bobby into the supplemental motion back in her original, um, when it all began, you got to remember, Bobby came in essentially last. When she originally had her motion, it was all Ryan. She even
Right, I
made
was gonna say
the
that.
yeah, she even made the bold statement saying there is only one killer, and the only killer that makes sense is Ryan Killigas. She wrote that in emotion. That is literally, it was a little bit paraphrasing, but that was, she boldly wrote he was the killer. And then a little bit later, a few months later, the supplemental motion comes in where she adapts Bobby Dassey as a Denny. So she basically produced Ryan as the main suspect and added Bobby in as a Denny, and then she eventually drops Ryan and then leads on to Bobby. And so when I followed along, I think Bobby became. It was always a strategic plan for her. And I'll try to sum it up as simplifying as I can. I think she was originally going after Ryan. She wanted to open a door for Bobby in the long run because of that Denny argument, which is fair, very clever, perfect idea. And I also think she was going after Bobby because he was, in her own words, the state witness. And I think that she originally thought that she was going to potentially get a hearing, or at best a retrial, based on her original motion on the bones and the day planner and all those things that now we know is procedurally barred. But I think she was trying to always put Bobby in there to discredit him, for the simple fact that if it ever went to a retrial, the state would have to drop him. Because if you go through and you read her original motion, she had forensic testing on the bullet. She had all these other things done. And forensically, that she was trying to, we have her doing the methylation testing and all these other things she required, because she was trying to destroy the state's narrative that was against Stephen. And Bobby fit into that. If you could make it so the state wouldn't call Bobby, that's something else they couldn't use in the long run. But when she got procedurally barred and everything was denied, and she unfortunately got, the whole thing blew up in her face and everything was just denied, even from the courts of appeal, she's now left with the one argument she didn't go in with the beginning. And she always had it there as a backup. So you can see she always had it as a backup plan if anything went shit, but she didn't use it. But now everything else is gone. She now has to bring it forward. And this is when you read the Courts of Appeals 2021 final say. There's a conclusion part, and they do say in fine lines that there is a potential barring of the Denny side of it, especially the Dassey computer, in a sense, because the thing is, they're trying to say to her, what do you have now that you didn't have back then, that you couldn't have had him as a Denny and raised this then? And this is where the witnesses kind of removed that and go, well, we didn't have witnesses then, but we do now, so we can present it for what it is. And that is the argument and why we're here today.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Because she did go with Ryan. She needs a direct connection to name an actual Denny, and Bobby kind of meets. Well, he doesn't. He doesn't. Um, he meets the direct connection, kind of. Um, it's I don't know. For me, he meets it through Steven. That's the thing, because he saw her. Steven's there. She met Steven, um, and then it gets a little goofy, but you know. I mean, Willis did kind of say more or less that, well, he probably does need the direct connection anyways. You still need the motive. She finds the computer. I'm with you though. I think she did. I really think she thought she was going to get the Brady on the computer anyways, and that backfired. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I don't think Ryan is going to fit the Denny qualifications because I don't know that you can make a direct connection with Ryan to Teresa on October 31st in that critical time span. Can you?
Yeah. Just a programming note for you guys. We're going to go live on Friday as well. Going to start playing around with having more lives on Fridays because Discussing a Murderer is coming to a close. We only got like 3 episodes left, and so just to in the meantime, before we come out with the next idea or the next on to the next, we are just going to do a couple more lives here and there. So I hope you guys can join us this Friday. If not, watch it on the replay. And that way we're going to, it might be a little more free flowing, maybe open it up to other questions. I know Big Jeff talked about coming and talking about pings. Actually, he's going to talk about cell phone stuff on one of these Friday night lives. And, let's see here. We had another idea of other things to do. We can talk about other cases as well. So, I think Big Jeff said he wanted to talk about the Utah 4 murder case. And so looking forward to that. Still leaving it open to how it's going to go and what we're going to do, but probably more of just like this, answering your guys' questions, kind of bringing a topic to the table. Maybe it's a weekly wrap up. We have some things to wrap up yet that we didn't get to, or so that's exciting. I hope you guys can join us on Friday. You can check the YouTube channel, and you'll get a notification about it. We can chat about some evidence. Yeah, Duke, that's right in the wheelhouse of that. So I think that's a great idea. With that said, not that I didn't mean to interrupt that great conversation we were having, but I just wanted to get that out while we still had the majority of people with us listening right now. Just open it up to any of you guys. We got any more questions, Kath?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Anyone want to ask a question? Go for it.
Yeah, let us know if you have any other questions or any comments, stuff to talk about. Bring a friend, but don't miss it. Yeah, Friday. Tell a buddy, bring a friend, but don't miss it. Yeah, I love, T1's if you keep talking like that, T1, I'm gonna keep putting your comments up. You know what I mean? These positive you rah comments. I like that stuff. Absolutely. So it should be fun. I'm not guaranteeing a Big Jeff this Friday, but on one of these Fridays, he has said that he will be able to make it. We got to talk with his schedule, and so I'm sure he's. Yes, that's another thing, Beckett. We can talk about Convicting a Murderer if it ever comes out, and well, I don't know. Is it going to come out in clips? Are they going to actually release this thing? I'm not holding my breath, but when it does come out and we do have something to talk about, it would be a great place to do that. So, and frankly, some of you out there who have been contributing a long time, maybe it's a chance for you to contribute even more and share more of your information. Like Duke, I think you've been working on some projects, so we'll be interested to hear what you have to say on your research, and kind of I'm going to have a little more free flowing, open kind of live for more general topics as well. So we'll see how it goes. But I hope you guys can join us this Friday.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah, I hope it's going to be great. It feels great. Sometimes I sit home at Friday nights, Calf, and I go, man, I could be doing a live right now. What am I doing? I'm not going to go out.
I wish it was Friday night for me.
Yeah, well,
I could sit here and have a wine.
Saturday morning's good too. Saturday morning cartoons. I used to do that as a child. Not exactly.
Yeah, but I'm not talking cartoons. I'm talking wine drinking. I can't do that on a Saturday morning. Oh my God.
Hey, you know what? It gives you more time to recover in the daytime. Then you know what I mean. You don't go to bed, and you're.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, it'll be good.
It'll be fun.
Duke was saying, want to talk bones a little, from the episode that you guys had just done. But did you just want to do that, or did you want to leave that for Friday?
Maybe we can talk more bones on Friday.
Yeah.
It kind of feels like one of those things that would be a really good, and then we can prepare for you. I think that's kind of what it might turn out. Like things that start off in the Tuesday live, right? And we want to, maybe you got some questions and we don't have an answer for you. Maybe it's a wrap-up show. You know what I mean? We'll try to do that, Duke. So, and then if you guys are in the Discord, put your questions in the Discord as well.
Yeah, that's true. I was just going to say, what is your actual question anyway, Duke? So we can, look up some files and do a bit of research so we can answer your question with accuracy. But yeah, you can always put them in the Discord channel as well.
Absolutely. Well, rumor has it works for Friday Fish Fries, which is a Wisconsin tradition that I was a part of almost every Friday when I lived there. If you guys do get a chance to go to Wisconsin for the Friday night fish fry, I highly recommend the lake perch. You can't go wrong with a lake perch. What do you think? Rumor has it, is that a pretty good recommendation for what to do? And get the potato pancakes if they have it. Anyway, anybody else? You guys got anything else? Burning questions? Kel, Brian, Calf, anything?
No, I just want to thank everyone for coming. I think it's awesome that everyone actually takes time out. We're all invested. We all still are here for the same reason. Let's get the boys out. We all have different opinions, and it's awesome when we bring it together and we just have those discussions. And I never ever claim that I know more than anyone else. I really don't. And that's why I just present to you guys my thoughts, what I've discovered in my own research, and I try to take you on a journey with me. And that's the only thing we can do is we, walk through it, and we walk through it together. The last thing I want to do to anyone is make you all think that I or anyone else are trying to force people to believe one way or the other, because I'm the first one to admit I have no idea what happened. And I am still open to all the narratives that's been put out there. Certain ones I don't. For example, there's no two Ravs, cut that shit. But, in terms of other things, like, and I get Kathleen's stance. I get the whole Bobby Dassey thing. Could he have done it? Yeah, maybe he did. I don't know. But do I think at this point with what she's presented, it's enough for the court? And that is where I come from when I make my opinions, is based on that. Because you got to remember, and for the people in the true crime community that watch, people like the Law Tube and people are following other cases, what's the one thing that they all share and the lawyers will always repeat? People like us in the community, the researchers, the people that are entwined and enjoy true crime, we all potential jurors. So we all have the ability to see and think logically, rationally, and normally outside of that four corners of the law. That's what makes us just as powerful as lawyers, because they look at cases for what they can do and what citations and law they can present. Well, we don't look at like cases like that. We look at it for what it's presented. And if we were a jury and we were presented with what was given, how would we think? What would we do? And that's what makes us powerful. And when we all come together and we have these discussions, we're like a jury of our own. And I think it's awesome. And kudos to everyone. And I'll see you guys next time.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure, Kel. Thanks for that. Brian, do you have some closing wrap-up comments you'd like to add?
No.
Are you ready for Friday?
Just
ready.
Yeah, just what Kel said. Yeah, I have no answers either. I have no idea what happened. I know, like, I don't know, some people are like into like big, huge conspiracy theories, and I have. I mean, I can follow the huge conspiracy theories, but doesn't necessarily agree with it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's not what happened. It's just
right.
It's just me, And that. Oh, and I was gonna say, I guess I was gonna say what Kel was saying too earlier. Yeah, see, I followed, and again, Bobby could have done it. Like, you can't rule that out. I had an easier time following Zellner and her Bobby did it theory a little bit better until but she does it day one when she says Bobby took the blood from Steven Sink and planted it in the wrap. So she puts that there. But then after that, yeah, the fact that she has to present the planting. Okay, not only did Bobby kill her, but then he planted the evidence to convict Steven, and that's where there's just no evidence that I can find. Aside from Sawinski, obviously, but this is before that. I mean, in his interviews and his, what he says. I mean, I don't know. It's just hard to think that the guy was thinking, like, oh, I'm gonna get my uncle when he's telling law enforcement that, well, who do you think did it? Well, I think law enforcement set them up, And
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, you know what I mean. And on the 9th, or on the 5th, even when he, why does he even? I mean, he could have just thrown Steven right under the bus, but he kind of but he only goes like halfway, where he's like, oh no, what do you mean Steven says I was the last one to see her? No, that's bullshit. I left, and which always makes me wonder, just like everybody else, did he see her leave? Did he not see her leave? I mean, was he still there? Did he leave first? It's hard to say one way or the other because of the way it was presented to him. But I don't know. Anyways,
No, I'm with you.
I know that we're
questions as everyone else, I guess.
I know we're meant to be.
But I would. Oh, real quick though, Dukes had asked a question about Bobby and the Mike O lie and why did he testify to that? Go back and read Bobby's testimony because
Yes.
I know Kratz says so. Okay, so November 3rd, you got a deer, a roadkill deer, and I am 99% sure that Kratz does not give him the day. Bobby totally walks into that at trial. I know Kel backed me up on that. And Cav, because we read it. I mean, you go back to Bobby's testimony and see, but Kratz totally leads him right into that. And next thing, and then Strang, very smartly, leads him right into it as well, and just leaves it there because Kratz is trying to establish the joke happening before Coburn came and informed anyone of a missing person, and it goes right over Bobby's head, and then I would have to reread it to remember exactly how it went. But yeah, Bobby just totally walked right into that, and he was kind of screwed over in a sense of, oh shit, now I got to tell a story but most of that story is just simple yes and no questions to what either Strang during cross-examination or Kratz was. It's mostly Kratz, but so like I say, Strang just keeps the deer on the 3rd at that point but he wants to make it happen after Coburn had left or came by and whatnot. Absolutely. Even though they'd argued for a mistrial and that. So I don't know just real quick. I don't know the exact answer to that, Dukes, but I do know that Kratz definitely walked him right into that before he realized he was even telling a lie. Yeah, I got a roadkill deer. So the 3rd, sure. Oh, you mean Thursday? Because I swear it's like all of a sudden a light bulb, like, oh wait, you saying I got it on Thursday? Shit, it was Friday. But I don't know that for sure. I'd have to reread it all. But okay.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I know we're meant to be closing out, but these questions kind of came up, and now that Brian's kind of addressed them, it'd be interesting just to quickly touch them up. What Brian was saying just before, how Bobby doesn't throw Steven essentially under the bus the way that other people could be interpreting it. Like you have him sitting there saying, I think law enforcement killed her. Here's an opportunity. He's meant to have just been the biggest planter of planters, and he's got an opportunity to do it. He's not utilizing that time to do it. He's going with another story. And here's the other thing. It can flip the other way as well. And I think Dr. Silkman has brought it in to an equation when we kind of like have spoken about the alternatives that if in hindsight, if we knew what we knew now in terms of what Steven even said, like explaining the blood, if Steven had just gone, oh, I had a cut finger, her car wouldn't start, I quickly, those are those what if moments. And the same with Bobby. Bobby could have, why didn't Bobby then just commit to, yeah, okay, I did see her leave? Because that's not just essentially helping Steven. That's essentially helping him, because then they're both each other's alibi that she left. So then Steven will be like, well, Bobby saw her leave, So he wasn't behind her directly because she was in front of him enough that he even saw her leave the property, and we were both still on the property at the same time. So neither of us could be doing it because we're still both here to witness her absence. So those are the things that I think people get caught up in, because you can't have this 19-year-old kid who's so thoughtful and was able to pull off the greatest frame, because that's essentially what we're meant to believe at this point, that he got away with not only murder, he got away with framing, and he wasn't quick enough to take advantage of Stephen being his alibi as well. So it's little things like that. And as for the Ken Kratz thing and the Bobby Dassey and the Myko Deer situation, here's the facts for you. Stephen Avery admits that conversation happened. Let's repeat that. Stephen Avery himself admits in an affidavit that conversation did happen.
Right.
Myko was there, but he says it didn't happen the way that Bobby has projected it out. He states it was the boys that originally approached him first and made the inappropriate joke, "Hey, Stephen, have you got that girl hidden under your bed?" Something on those lines. So he's never said she didn't, it never not happened. He admits it happened.
Well, he
But
did.
they all had,
Maybe I'll find it. Maybe I'll find it Friday. There's a few phone calls.
The phone call.
It's very,
Yep.
and it's very, so the joke, the whole joke thing is very, very similar to the fire. There wasn't a fire, there wasn't a joke, and then Michael says there was a joke, and Stephen and Ma are talking about it, and Stephen's like, "What are you talking about? I never talked to Michael. Why would I talk to Mike Osmondson? I hate that fucker, or whatever, whatever he says to Ma." Maybe I'll find it, and so by trial, that very well could be by whether Bobby heard the joke, whether the joke ever happened, who knows? By the time trial came around and Bobby was asked about the joke, I think he at least knew the story. And I think that was, I don't know, obviously, but it doesn't seem, reading the testimony, it doesn't seem like Bobby understood why Kratz was even bringing it up. And then Strang, of course, argues for the mistrial because it's like, oh yeah, I didn't think we'd ever hear about this because he said it happened, but it said it happened on the 10th, and like his dates were so confused. And Stephen Avery was already in custody at the time Mike Osmondson's saying he told the joke. So I'm really confused as to why this line of questioning is even happening right now. And I think Bobby was kind of real similar, although again he was prepped, obviously. So who knows? Maybe he knew exactly what he was doing. I don't know. I just don't think he really saw the true significance of the joke and whether or not it happened. It's such a simple joke. I mean, you know what I mean? Whether it happened or not, I mean, could it have happened?
Right.
Sure. Did it?
I mean,
Who knows? And you know what I mean? And by a year and a half, 2 years later, when trial rolls around, Bobby, again, he knew the story. Everybody knew the story because Stephen kind of.
I've heard a lot of off-color remarks come in a lot of really strange times before too, and they were completely non-nefarious. They were just in bad.
Oh,
taste.
right, yeah. I think Bobby even says that.
He does. Point. I think he says right in the court. He's like,
says, "Well, yeah, I knew he was." Yeah, I think he says right in court. I knew he was joking.
Well, they all attest to that. That's the thing. Even though Stephen eventually, if we want to talk about taking affidavits seriously, because you got to remember, a lot of people's arguments right now is, well, this person must be telling the truth because they wrote it in an affidavit. Stephen Avery wrote in an affidavit. He settled with the fact, for his fact, that there was a joke, that did happen. Mike was present, maybe not in the words that, maybe not in the structure that the Mike and Bobby say it happened, but that incident happened. So, and I think, and here's another thing, Brian Dassey also says it happened. I went back and read Brian Dassey's things, which we should address him in another total, live, and I can present to you guys some very, very interesting things that kind of hurt him in a sense, because he's got currently an affidavit put forward for KZ, but it makes me worried how much he would stand up in court in terms of credibility and how he would have a lot of holes in it. But we'll address that another day. But he even says that when asked, was there anything around that time that you remember sticking out to you? He's the one that says, actually, I do remember that I heard that Stephen had made an inappropriate comment to my brother Bobby and his friend Mike about getting rid of a body. So even Brian's repeating this alleged joke to law enforcement, saying that it was Stephen, rah, rah, rah. And then going back, and the last thing I promise that Brian hit on, people go back to the testimony. A few months ago, a few of us went on a chat, and I read it out. And when you read it out, we all had this moment, because it was like, you see Ken Kratz, exactly what Brian said, walk Bobby into Ken Kratz's narrative, what he was trying to do. And that was, he knew the door hadn't been opened, but he opened the door himself, and Bobby never agreed to it because he was probably understood where he was going. He agreed to it because, like the fire, like the shower, when Bobby is led into a question, Bobby just gives the yep. He doesn't actually take a minute to go, hang on a minute. And you see that hang on a minute happen, because when Dean Strain gets involved and starts his cross-examination, he confuses Bobby, and Bobby, he goes, it couldn't have been the third. And Bobby ends up having to say, well, I don't know. It was the same day that I had the deer. And Dean's like, so that's the fourth. So he cleverly undid all Ken Kratz's bullshit in that one bit by making Bobby walk himself into having to go, hang on a minute, it wasn't the third. It's the day that the deer was found, and I was guttering it, and that's the fourth. Because they said, you've got a ticket for it. And what date was that? Well, that was the fourth. Well, then that's the day it was. So Ken gets played by Dean there very cleverly, and Bobby was just taken for the ride.
Yeah. I did want to read a comment from Becca Chu, and that is, I just wanted to read it out. I know it's been up on the screen for a while, but I wanted to verbalize it, that there is a rally in Manitowoc on the 22nd in front of the Manitowoc County Courthouse. So if you can go, please go. Also, I believe Becca will have Pete Dassey, Brendan's dad, on her channel this Friday. So check out Becca's channel around 5:30 Wisconsin time. So check that out. Pete's always a great guy to listen to, and to kind of get a little feel of who Brendan is as a person. So thank you, Becca, for sharing that with us. And got any other comments here that came up? Oh, what's this last one here? Stephen Avery definitely says and does some pretty inappropriate things. However, I believe he would never have joked about a murder he actually committed. Yeah, like that's the point. That's the point. You would make the joke about something you didn't do, but if you did do it, this is the last thing you would ever bring up in a conversation.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Like that's what makes me think that Ken Kratz used it as a manipulative, strategic method to bring into the courtroom, because I don't think Ken was as confident as he thought. I think he knew he was slipping in certain areas and he was getting desperate. That's why he was taking risks by throwing in these things that potentially could have got him because they were calling for a retrial based on it. So he was playing dangerously, because I think he was actually getting desperate and worried that he wasn't getting what he needed to get across. So I agree. I don't think that, even if this, going on what we know, this joke was not as bad as it seemed, but Ken Kratz tried to make it something because he just wanted to win and he was getting desperate. On top of that, I agree. Like, there's been other things that were said in the case towards Stephen in terms of like his demeanor and stuff and how he was acting around this time, and coming from people that who are now kind of put in an affidavit for him, and you think this is the problem with the family, this is the problem with the case itself, is who do you trust? Like, and how much do you trust? Are people just trying to put in fill-ins? Like they just don't know the family, so they're just trying to help.
And I believe everything that law enforcement touches is tainted. Every interview they're trying to weave their thread of their narrative. I really believe they manipulated everybody they could. So that's the other, flip side to that.
Absolutely.
Well, it's let's see here. Is there something else? The rally's at 10 a.m. So if you guys can be there, check out the rally. I'm sure there'll be some footage. Someone will have some footage from it this year, and awesome. So I guess that does it for it. Well, look at that. We're almost right on the dot at an hour and a half. Let's see if we can make that happen right on the ending. So for Calf and Brian and Kel, this is Jeff Jones saying this has been Discussing a Murderer.